The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 81 of the Squawk Ident Podcast, recorded on the 6th of June, 2021, from the Mobile Aviator Sound Studios from high atop the 5th floor of the Hyatt Place DFW, just south of the Dallas International Airport. On today's episode of the Squawk Ident Podcast, we explore the rise of assault and battery charges coming from aircraft. That's right. What to expect when you're flying into an airport that is co-located with the military base, and the ATIS controllers say, cleared to land, arresting cable up. What? All of us here at the show have had some sort of flight training this month. We discuss my Recurrent event, Rob's long-term initial coming up, and Roger's going to have some upcoming training too. I also had an amazing opportunity to step back into the GA world with an exclusive invitation to take command of the Wong Warrior. That's right. After 15 years since my last command of a normally aspirated single-engine aircraft, I was able to join one of our favorite guests from episode 74, a warrior and a pilot, Miss Christy Wong. She and I took flight in her 1981 Piper Warrior. We have some audio from the post-flight meetup and much more. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 81 of the Squawk Ident Podcast is officially underway. Well, before we start that pre-flight checklist, I want to again thank Captain Greg Ogburn for joining us on episode 80, Mounted Archer Hits Aviation Bullseye. If you've not looked into mounted archery, it's a very impressive sport, and I gotta say, it's pretty badass. To be joined by Greg for a one-on-one interview was so very cool. Thanks again, Captain Ogburn. We look forward to flying with you again real soon. Here to help me kick off today's show is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. He joins us from his remote studio and, dare I say, classroom, high atop the Marriott Residence Inn. Residence? That's fancy. In Miami Beach, Florida, where he is trying to quickly learn the French aviation engineering philosophies so he can understand how to fly an Airbus. Help us in welcoming our very own Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Bonjour. I'm doing good. How are you?
Bonjour, monsieur. Man, this has been a crazy couple weeks for all of us.
Tell me about it,
we
man.
have been trying to get episode 81 recorded now for days, and as is the schedule of pilots, not just airline pilots, but pilots in general, every time we thought it would work out, something came up. And
it's been busy.
But we have a jam-packed show today. We're going to talk about some of the things that have been happening in the news lately. Just a quick brief on, keeping those 737s off the pole. I always thought it was the goal of any father out there to keep their children off the pole, and now it's the chief pilot's job to keep the 737 off the pole. I mean, come on, man, this is crazy. But
that's crazy.
That could have happened to anyone, and we're going to talk about a little bit of how it happened, and we're also going to talk a little bit about some of these incidents that are happening on aircraft. And now that everyone's got a film recording studio in their pocket that uploads to the web instantaneously, every time this happens. Yeah. So, but here we are. The only reason that we were able to record today, we were actually going to delay the recording until Monday, but the only reason that we were able to do it today is I had a 4-leg day, and right in the middle of it, the turn canceled. So leg 2 and 3 canceled. That's 6.5 hours of sit time, and Legacy Airlines in very good fashion. Before I got a chance to call them, they called me and said, First Officer Tony, saw that your flight canceled there to Austin and back. So, we're going to give you the option. If you'd like a day room, we'll put you up in one of the hotels. And I was
nice.
Absolutely. So that gives me an opportunity to get away from the noise and the hustle and bustle of the airport and come into a hotel room and put my feet up for a while. And then I texted you and I said, hey, what are you doing for the next 4 hours?
So might as well do our part-time gig.
That's it.
Since our full-time gig's on hold.
Yeah, and it gives you a break from doing some of that studying that you're doing, and such a good boy.
Yeah, it's definitely been occupying my free time and trying to just kind of get spooled up on the systems assignments on the Airbus. So that's taken a lot of time. As you know, it's electronic electronic flight bag, and everything is done at home, computer-based training.
Yeah.
And so you have to sit there in front of the screen and really pay attention, because there's always a quiz after every module. And the goal is obviously to get 100%, which never happens because some of these questions are worded a little I wouldn't say weird, but there's always 1 or 2 questions in there that are, just don't have the answers all sound the same.
Yeah. There's a couple in there in that systems online quiz that they have, which is a wonderful way to really get to know the systems that you're responsible for. But there's a couple of questions in there that there's more than one right answer. You just have to figure out which one's the righter answer. Pardon my English.
If you're like me, you see the first one is the right answer, but because of the last 7 questions, it's a 1-click answer, and this one happens to be a multiple click answer question, so you have to select more than one. But of course I didn't get, my eyes I'm just too quick, so I select the one that I know that's right, but then there's 2 or 3 others that are correct below it too, and I forget to select those. So, that is incorrect. And I'm like, no, that is right. And then all the 3 other ones pop up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's 2. But I didn't read all those because I just stopped at the first one.
Yep. RTFQ, buddy.
Yeah, that's right. Read the whole
freaking question. Yeah. And if there's answer A and B are correct or all of the above, you're
good chance.
Pretty close to you can guess that one, multiple guess. But here we are. It's just so happy that we were able to meet up. Roger, unfortunately, is out and about in the skies above the United States, working his butt off. And I even reached out to our good friend Kyle, who had a sign-in about 10 minutes ago, so he wasn't able to make it either.
Ah, poor guy.
Yeah. But the DFW airport today and yesterday evening, just fiasco.
I got to tell you, with all the storms rolling through, the airport has been just going from one recovery to another. And we do not need the water. There's so much rain coming from the skies. The DFW, Texas area is flooded. I mean, the lakes are flooded. There's parks along the lakes, so you can't even get to the lake, get to the parks because they're flooded in water. I mean, some of the water goes past the parking lots in some of these places. So we do not need any more rain.
Well, send it my way, would you? Because Southern California, as a matter of fact, I just read an article that all of California is now officially under drought.
Yeah, you could take it, please.
Yeah. Well, you know.
And stupid me, I forgot to turn off my sprinkler system throughout this whole last month. I thought I turned it off, and I've been, busy working and everything like that. And plus, it's so wet all the time that you don't even know if your sprinkler systems are going off or not.
Yeah.
So my wife looks at the water bill, and she's like, "Why is our water bill so high?"
Uh-oh.
And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Maybe we have a leak somewhere." And then I was like, "Well, let me go test the sprinklers and make sure, 'cause that's usually the first place there's a leak." I go look at the switch for the sprinkler system, and it says auto.
Nice.
Oh man.
Nice.
So
yeah,
flip that thing back to off, and hopefully that'll help the water bill problem and the flooding, for that fact, because I don't need to add any more water to the yard.
Right. I have an old school sprinkler control system as well, and I've been seriously considering upgrading to one of the Wi-Fi.
Is that the one that goes? I see.
No, just a Wi-Fi unit, so that from your phone it like links up to an app, and if it rains, it automatically shuts it off, and you can adjust it from your phone. So if you're not home, and you can go, "Oh, I forgot to turn it back on," or whatever. Yeah,
good idea.
That's the way to do it. But hey, let's talk about the latest that has been hitting the interwebs with the Southwest Airlines assault video. Now, a flight attendant that had asked a passenger towards the back of the aircraft to repeatedly put or don their face mask, as is required by the FAA, the NTSB, the TSA. They all are now federally mandating that while on board an aircraft at all times, unless you're actively eating and drinking, you must wear a mask. And a passenger was asked multiple times to don the mask properly. Now, we have been instructed that there is a procedure now in place at Legacy Airlines, and I know all the airlines have set out some kind of procedure in place for non-compliance. Now, for us, there's a form the flight attendant will issue to the passenger, the captain's notified, and then it's at the captain's discretion whether or not to continue the flight or to divert the flight, which is always an option, or continue with law enforcement action. I mean, it all just depends on the escalation of the event. Well, from the video, you can see that this event escalated real quick, and this female passenger punched a female flight attendant in the face, causing her to lose 2 teeth.
Unbelievable.
We are going to sue you. Sit down. Don't you dare touch a flight attendant like this. She came out her purse. She came out her purse. Sit down. She came out her purse. Sit down. Sit down.
I mean,
there's just no need for that.
So, obviously the woman was arrested. Thankfully, an ABP, an able-bodied passenger, stepped in and got between them and was able to de-escalate a little bit until they could get on the ground and take care of the situation. But this is ridiculous. I mean, what do you think? Have you had any of these kind of escalations come up?
No, I haven't had anything come up when pertaining to a passenger assaulting another passenger or crew member. But I did have an intoxicated individual during boarding run past the gate agent. So in other words, they had a little verbal confrontation up at the gate with the gate agent, and the gate agent decided to not board this individual because of the intoxication and the confrontation they're having. And the passenger decided, well, I'm not going to listen to the gate agent. I'm just going to walk or run or jog by the the podium and just go onto the airplane, which, now they're trespassing. And they were not ticketed in first class, but she decided she was going to take a first class seat. So the agent stopped boarding, and she came down the jet bridge, and she was very polite. She's like, "Ma'am, we need you to get off the airplane. I haven't scanned your ticket yet, and besides, you're not seated in first class." She's like, "Well, I'm going to be sitting here for the flight, and you already know where you have the computer up there. You can just scan whatever ticket you issue, but make it first class." So that went back and forth a couple minutes, and then finally she's like, "Okay." She's like, we're gonna have to call law enforcement to get you off the airplane because you refuse to move. Yeah. She's like, "Well, fine, I'm not moving." So a few minutes later, law enforcement shows up. They ask her to get off the airplane, and she's like, "Nope, I'm not leaving." So after a few minutes of asking her to get off, then they're finally like, "Okay, we got to deplane the whole airplane." Right. That's the only way to get them all off, to get her off. And as everybody's starting to get up, another ABP, able-bodied passenger, starts pleading with the individual. She's like, the man was like, "Hey, listen, if you just get up and walk off this airplane right now, you'll have a much easier time getting to where you need to go. And besides, you're intoxicated and you may be on some kind of influence of some other substance, but I'm sure you have a clear enough mind to think clearly. If they have to remove you with the police officer, you will be going to jail and you will be suffering a major fine. So why don't I help you up? We'll help you up the jet bridge. We'll do this together, and we could all end this in a good way." Yeah. And she just started tearing up, and she's like, "Yeah, it's fine. Let's go." So she ended up walking up with that man. Everybody gave that guy a huge round of applause because he really did a good job of. He must have been like a hostage negotiator in some life or something like that. Yeah. But anyway, long story short, that's the it didn't escalate like the Southwest incident, but we have some people that are definitely it's the level of craziness on board our flights are skyrocketing. Yeah. So
yeah, and it's tough. I've heard a couple incidences lately, similar in nature. And your incident actually reminded me of a joke that a captain once told me. And I think it's clean enough and it doesn't offend too many people, I can tell you now, but it's a very similar joke. And it says, yeah, there was a flight and there's this beautiful woman that was sitting in coach in the middle of the flight. She gets up and she walks to the first class area, and there was an open seat. So she sits down. Well, the flight attendant that was working in the coach cabin saw this happening and said, "Huh." So he follows her through into the first class and says, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but your ticket is a coach ticket. I can't have you up here. These are reserved for first class passengers only. You do not have a first class seat." And she says, "Oh, well, I'm beautiful and I belong up here with all the beautiful people. I'm going to be sitting here for the rest of the flight. I've got a first class, I belong in first class." And the flight says, "Oh, ma'am, you have to go back to coach, to the seat that you paid for. I'm not moving. I'm beautiful. You can't make me move." So the flight attendant doesn't want to have an altercation. So he goes up and tells the purser, which is the lead flight attendant that works the first class galley. And the lead flight attendant says, "Okay, I'll handle this." So she walks back there and looks her, in the face and gets real close to her and looks her in the eyes and says, ma'am, you did not buy a first class seat. I'm going to need you to collect your bag right now and follow me to the back and take your originally assigned seats, or there will be trouble. Okay? You need to get your stuff." And without missing a beat, she's like, "Well, I'm a beautiful person. I belong up here with the beautiful people, and you can't make me move." So the purser's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So she calls the captain in the intercom. and says, "Captain, we got a problem back here. I have a passenger that refuses to move back to her coach seat. She's in a first class seat, and we've asked her multiple times. She will not move." And the captain goes, "Oh, yeah, I've heard about this happening. By any chance, is she a relatively attractive blonde woman?" She's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Huh, okay." So he looks at his FO, and he goes, "How do you think we should handle this?" And the FO's young. FO, he's like, I don't know. What do you think? Maybe if I go back there, I'm a pilot, maybe she sees me in uniform, she'll be a little intimidated and she'll move back. And he's like, "You know what? Why don't you go ahead and try that?" So the flight attendant comes up, and the first officer goes to the back and says, "Ma'am, listen, you're really causing a disturbance here. I really need you to move to your original seat. Otherwise, the captain's going to have to take action here, and you're not going to like it." She goes, "I'm a beautiful person. I belong up here with the beautiful people in first class, and you're not going to make me move." So the FO was like, "What the hell?" So he goes back up to the cockpit, and the captain says, "She didn't move, did she?" He goes, "No, she didn't move. She's not intimidated by my uniform at all." And he goes, "You guys are a bunch of amateurs. I'll handle this." So he gets up, he goes to the back, he whispers in her ear. Immediately she goes, "Oh my God, Captain, I'm so sorry. Oh yes, I'll move right away." And she gets her things and she goes back to the back of the airplane and sits down in coach. And everybody is like just dumbfounded, like, "What the heck just happened? What did you tell her?" He's like, "Listen, I've been married to a good-looking blonde for 25 years. You just have to know how to talk to him." He's like, "Well, yeah, but what did you say?" "I made it very clear that first class wasn't going to Cleveland with the rest of us. First class was going to Charlotte."
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be here all podcast.
That's like the longest joke I've ever told.
Stewardesses on your way out.
Yes, Lady Entertainer here. Do some stand-up now that you're a captive audience. Yes, thank you very much.
Nice.
Yeah. Sorry, just had to share that one.
That's funny.
Yeah, well, Delta is not immune to this whole incident. They had a flight actually divert recently, and the passenger stormed the cockpit in flight and was restrained. We got a little bit of audio from that, and let's take a listen from the CBS Evening News.
There's been more bad behavior in the skies. Tonight, the FBI is looking into the actions of a passenger who forced a Delta Airlines jet to make an emergency landing in Albuquerque. CBS's Michael George reports.
They were supposed to fly from Los Angeles to Nashville, but Delta Flight 386 diverted to Albuquerque, New Mexico late Friday when a passenger caused a disruption. He was screaming, "Stop the plane," according to Jessica Robertson. She was one of the 162 passengers on board and took this video from her third row seat. Tom Beanert sat in 1B.
They're not clowning around. And I realized they were in a full-on, fight, wrestling.
CBS News has learned flight attendants were forced to act when the man approached the 737's flight deck.
Delta 386, the passenger still restrained? Yes, sir, Delta 386.
After making an emergency landing, the unruly passenger was removed by authorities. Delta told CBS News thanks to the crew and passengers of Delta Flight 386 who assisted in detaining an unruly passenger.
Chris Williams had come back up and was sitting in the jump seat, and I was just so impressed with the guy.
This man seated nearby tweeted, "The attendant just saved the plane." Michael George, CBS News, New York.
So that, again, from CBS News, I'll put a link in the show notes. A wonderful job by the crew. You train for these kind of scenarios. A lot of it's theoretical training. Some physical training for the flight attendants when they go through Recurrent every year. But until it happens in real life, you never know how it's going to end up. You never know how you're going to react. And I just want to say they did a phenomenal job of keeping it cool. And thanks to the passengers that got involved, that stepped in. If you're an able-bodied person and you see something that is not right, we count on you. We count on you to at least stand up and be present and help.
It was really, really awesome to watch that flight attendant take command of the situation when you watch the video, instructing the ABPs, the able-bodied passengers, on what we needed to do and how to handle the situation, and then they had to reposition that subdued passenger to the back of the aircraft, of course, where they want to get him as far away from the cockpit as possible, even though he's subdued at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But he really did a very good job. He looks like he had some kind of military experience before, just by the way he was. Well, I mean, it's flight attendant training too, but he definitely took command of the situation, and he directed the guys, or the people that were helping him, hey, let's pick him up by the arms, face down, drag him back, and let's get him in the back. I don't care if you're Black, white, Indian, Asian, I can use all the help we can get. Let's get him back there.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that was cool, man. Yeah, it's crazy, man. That passenger certainly had some issues going on, and because when they were trying to subdue him, it sounded like he was saying, we need to stop the airplane. We need to stop the airplane. And he kept repeating it over and over and over and over until he was completely exhausted.
Yeah. And I think 9 out of 10, when these scenarios develop, it usually has something to do with the mental health of the passenger involved, because no sane person would have these kind of actions, would say these kind of things. So,
Sure.
yeah, it's a testament to what we deal with every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the masks are definitely causing some kind of, alter ego or chemical reaction or hypoxic, situation in the body where people are, and it's cramped back there, and it's, it's definitely, people are always in your personal space. And then, up until recently, we haven't had any service back there. And,
yeah,
you by the time you walk on the airplane, from the time you get to the airport, find a parking spot, go through security lines, which are just ridiculously long, and then try to find something to drink or eat in the airport, where those lines are crazy long. And then you get on an airplane and, there's no services involved. It's pretty stressful.
Yeah.
And I could see people snapping, and there's definitely no excuse for that. But, I'm just saying those are some of the contributing factors to probably some of the, some of the
incidents
problems we've been having on board.
Yeah.
This country, we are going to hell.
It's been kind of crazy. We've talked about this on the show plenty of times. We talked about the incident I had in Hawaii, which is extremely similar. I mean, the only difference is what happened in Hawaii was, and I think I talked about this last show or the show before. I had a passenger. We were still on the ground. We had just started the engines. This passenger ran from the back of the plane to the front of the plane. And he was saying, let me off, let me off, let me off. I need to get off this plane. Yeah. The only difference is we were on the ground. We had not taken off yet. 4 more minutes and we would have been in the air. So we were able to handle the situation on the ground. It's very similar. We used flex cuffs as well. These things happen. Now, we didn't make the news because nobody filmed it. That's the only difference. And I think everybody, even on our flight, handled the situation excellently. And in our flight, a passenger got bit.
Man.
An able-bodied passenger that was holding. It took 5 men to hold this very small statured male down. So we thought drugs were involved because that guy was like animal beast mode. These things happen, So if you're not flying, look around, be aware, don't be so oblivious and knee deep plugged into the matrix, watching your TikTok videos while you're boarding, that you don't actually look around and see what's going on, or even in flight, every once in a while, look around, look up. Life is happening, and it's for your safety as well.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. Good advice.
So, last week I was doing a pretty cool trip, actually about a week and a half ago. And it was the last trip right before my training event, my R12, which is now every 12 months we got a retraining cycle. So R12, 12-month training cycle. And I did a little bit of studying. I cracked some books. I pulled out all my notes. I have a notebook that is dedicated only for recurrent training and training. And so I have all my notes in there from the very beginning, from new hire class. So every time I go, I would just keep writing the notes, to rewrite them, and it's a good way to kind of review. Yeah, because it's been a while since I had the last few observations, and so it was a good place. Plus, I went online and looked at all the recurrent information that was posted on both the legacy website and airbusdriver.net. We've talked about that on the show too. It's a third-party website that they update like what the latest and the greatest is from the rumor mill, the gouge, as one would call it. And so I felt relatively prepared, but as we've mentioned many times before, I have PTSD from the sandpiper training that we all received. That respect the stick. You will be hit on the knuckle with the stick if you do not press the right button. It's like, wait, what? Ow!
Yeah.
So
we all have that.
We've all had that. So the week before that, I flew a really cool trip into Fort Walton Beach. So it was, I think it was LA to Dallas, Fort Walton Beach, if I remember correctly. And I hadn't been there in a while, since Sandpiper days. This was my first time flying in there under the Legacy livery. And I had a real top-notch captain flying with me, and it was my leg. So I briefed the arrival, what we expected. We talked about they keep you high, and they chop you and drop you. Let's be prepared for that. Okay. We're going to be doing an ILS to runway 19 in visual conditions, and they might clear us the visual. We'll just do our best to get fully configured by the final approach fix in case they slow us way down. There is intensive jet training and jet exercises going on there, military aircraft. So our head will be on a swivel. Plus, on top of that, there's a lot of GA traffic around the area too, along the beach. So we were ready. And as we were starting our descent, again, we were a little high because they keep you high. They said, well, hey, can you accept the visual to 1-2? And like, yeah, sure. We talked about this as being a possibility. Let's accept the visual 1-2. So they gave us a radar vector. The radar vector, while we were getting the radar vector, we were still on autopilot, just above 10,000 feet. We're like, hey, let's plug in runway 12 here, back it up with the instrument approach. And I talked about it. And we talked about the arresting cable, because they have military training there. They have an arresting cable that sits on these rubber donuts just above the surface of the asphalt or the runway. And so there are ops pages or operations pages that our company has published in our Jeppesen manual that indicates that when you're coming in to land, if the cables on the ATIS or the controller tells you that the cables are raised or up, that means that the cable's sitting on the top of the runway surface on these orange donuts, flanked on either side by big yellow circles and sometimes the buildings as well. So if that's the case, try landing just beyond that, and the runway numbers for that are also published on the 10-9 chart. So we briefed all of that. We had plenty of runway. We had to do a landing assessment because it's non-normal. You don't normally land past the aiming point markers, but you're still within the first third of the runway or first 3,000 feet, whatever it is, shorter. So we're like, great. And as we started our descent, I had just finished the brief, and the controller says, you know what, Legacy, we changed our mind. It's going to be a visual, runway 19, fly to the outer marker, you're clear of the visual. Okay, no problem. So since we're below 10, I had the captain plug that into the FMGC or the FMS, and we're like, okay, I verified the waypoints. Go ahead and extend me off that final approach fix, and we're cleared the visual. Let's start to get configured, and as previously briefed. And We are at 1,500 feet, and they say, we have an aircraft disabled on the runway. Can you accept the circle to land visual runway 12? We're like, absolutely. So it was all asses and elbows, my friend. I immediately clicked the autopilot off, turned the flight directors both off, I had him pull the altitude hold feature, and then I said, all right, give me a heading. I'm going to snap to this heading. It was basically a 45-degree entry to a visual downwind at 1,500 feet. And he's like, oh, sweet. So, okay, and pull heading. I said, pull the speed, dial it back to a certain speed so I could start to slow to get fully configured. As soon as we were midfield downwind, the gear came down. We went to flaps 2. And before we turned base leg, I was at flaps 3, fully configured, and the landing checklist was complete. Completely did a visual approach, raw data, and he actually had time to push a couple buttons on the flight management computer, and he actually extended me off of runway 12. And on the Airbus, you'll learn that if you go in flight directors off, raw data, autopilot off, you press the track, or the bird, we call it, the track button. So instead of heading and altitude, it gives you a track and a flight path angle. And there's a little green dot on the right side where the ILS normally would be displayed. And that green dot is a 3-degree glide path from the runway threshold that the computer gives you some kind of reference. So you always have a reference, even when you're raw data. And
nice.
It was one of the nicest, cleanest, dare I say, visual approaches to a circle to land on a basic downwind pattern, and landed just beyond the arresting cables, and it was a nice turn off. And the captain's like, damn, dude, you're ready for that simulator, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I was,
a lot of people don't realize, visual approaches are a little more challenging in heavy jets than they are in smaller general aviation airplanes. Not that to say that they can't be done with ease, just that the sight pictures are not normal. I mean, because most of the time we're using lateral and vertical guidance pretty much all the way down to the runway from from usually 100 miles out, starting with the arrival. So descending from the flight levels down to the airport, we're given altitudes and headings and airspeeds, or we're following those procedures on a published procedure. So by the time we get down to the runway, I mean, everything is pretty much already pre-planned for us. So when we're given just a raw, there's the airport, go land on it, it turns into a different ball of wax, because those normal cues or normal checkpoints or fixes or lateral or vertical guidance symbols just aren't there. Well, I mean, they're there, but they're not as I forget. I'm here a lack of terms or words for it, but they're not used, or they're not I hate when I get like this, but they're not used in conjunction with the auto flight and and everything that we have in the airplane. So because the 737 is the same way. If you just do raw data, I mean, not even raw data, if you just do a visual approach, I mean, good luck.
Yeah. I think when the normal symbology is presented on the PFD, or the primary flight display, when the normal symbology is displayed and you have a path, you have vertical guidance, you have horizontal guidance, you have airspeed guidance, you have everything's laid out for you with normal symbology, even with the autopilot off on a hand-flown approach, you know what to expect, you know what it should look like, and you have over 1,000 points of reference helping you out, making sure that you're on speed, on path, and on guidance. When you shut all of that off and go to the lowest level of automation, and it's a glass cockpit, and so now all the normal symbology has disappeared, and now you're looking at a different symbology that you maybe see possibly only when you're in the simulator. I mean, just dependent upon how often you try to go out of your comfort zone to do these things. So to be able to shoot a clean visual approach that is not just a straight in with the flight path angle of 3 degrees, and you could do the math. Great, good for you. You know your 3-to-1 rule. Great.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing this and you're doing a downwind and you have to judge your ground speed, what direction the wind's coming from, do I have enough distance from the runway to make a nice clean turn, or am I going to overshoot the final? Am I going to undershoot? Then am I going to end up high or low? So when you execute one of these maneuvers, this is just what it really is, to a landing, and it comes out like that, I mean, you know, I'm not to try to toot my own horn, but you know, even a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while. I'm just saying, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Well, it probably helped that you did a little GA flying earlier too in the week. I think last week, so that probably helped out a lot.
We're gonna get to that. That was after.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, that was after. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a fantastic layover in Fort Walton Beach.
Cool.
The sugar sand, the really fine white sand, that Gold Coast of the Gulf Coast. Everything was open. Masks were optional if you were fully vaccinated. No one had a mask on that was fully vaccinated. We were able to go to dinner. The captain and I went to the crab. I think it was called the Crab Stick or the Crab Shack or something like that. Oh my God. It was sit outside patio, watch the freaking sun go down, have a couple adult beverages, and talk about good times, man. It doesn't get any better than that. There's a new appreciation for it, actually.
Yeah, man. And oh, by the way, that cable system that you were speaking about earlier, that you had the land pass and everything. Yeah, that's called the Bach 12. And sometimes they combine it with a Bach 14. BAK, it's a arrestor barrier system that's I think it's made by a company called Fairlead. I'm sorry, Aviation Alliance, but they're called Bach 12 and Bach 14. So basically it's a cable system that the Air Force and Air National Guard use at all these airports that to trap Air Force fighter jets whenever they have an emergency situation that involves the inability to stop the aircraft. And so it just like a Navy airplane landing on an aircraft carrier uses one every time. The Air Force jets only use them when they have to in an emergency. And I've seen many airplanes use that system over the years when I was enlisted, from F-111s, F-4s, F-16s, and it's fun to watch. It's exciting because it doesn't happen every day, and it's usually when they're getting ready to use that cable, they've declared an emergency, so all the fire trucks, first responders are out, and all the safety officer of flight, or they call it the SOF, they're out there watching and managing the scene and everything like that. And it can get pretty exciting because that's something that they practice, but a lot of things can go wrong taking those barriers. If you mess something up. So anyway, they're designed to stop a fighter aircraft, but they're also designed so that so aircraft like the ones we fly, they can actually land on top of them. Well, I wouldn't say on top of them, land and roll over them and not cause any damage or problems with the aircraft, other than a big thump. It's like a mini speed bump in a runway.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll put a link in the show notes to some information on those systems. The next day, I was doing my walk around. It was a kickoff flight, doing my walk around, and I heard something very cool. It was an F-22, or actually a pair of F-22s getting ready for takeoff. So I shot a couple videos and put them on the Squawk Ident podcast social media there on Instagram and Facebook. And so it was really cool to get to see that. And that's when I was reminded that, there's arresting cables out there. So when I got back in the airplane, I was perusing the flight release, our, digital copy of 50 pages per flight of information, NOTAMs, and all this performance numbers and everything that's there. But on there, our performance numbers did say that all performance numbers for runway 12, which is what we were departing on, have the takeoff roll starting after the arresting cables when they're up. And there was even some instructions in our operations page that say on departure, you want to use taxi thrust until you've gone over the cables with the mains, and then roll it into a takeoff thrust setting. And your performance numbers are good from that point. There's a photo that I took. I took a quick photo as we were taxiing and was able to snap one out real quick. And I'll post that on there. And it's about 1,500 feet down the runway. Yeah. You can see it kind of past the aiming point markers.
The marker, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put
little donuts too to hold it up.
Yep. And it was a little good the dump as we crossed. And and then sure enough, we went from there. So yeah, really cool experience. And by the time we got back to Dallas, that was it. Dallas back to LA, and we were done.
Nice, man.
I had a day off.
That's an exciting day. And you had 1 day off.
1 day off. 1 day off. I repacked, did laundry, repacked, got everything ready, got out all my notebooks and everything, and had to pack not for a trip, but for my DFW training.
Aha.
So went into DFW, got to the hotel, rented a car, and ended up having the opportunity to drive out to the Denton Airport, just north of Dallas, where I had a meetup with our very own Christy Wong, CFI, Gold Seal CFI. If you remember back on episode 74, entitled A Warrior and a Pilot, we learned about how Christy Wong, who was a clinical allergist, decided, oh man, I really want to fly airplanes. I've loved airplanes since I was a little girl, and here she is, living the
Great
dream.
Story.
Yeah. So if you want to know more about that and you haven't checked that out yet, or you're new to the podcast, definitely go back and take a listen. She gave me a tour of her home airport. She brought some barbecue with her. I mean, come on.
Cool.
Like I'm like at her invite to go
taking care of her guests.
And
That's awesome.
I'm like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be doing the buy-in here. You're taking me up and you're bringing me barbecue. And she actually had a student that was getting ready for stage check for his instrument rating. And so he was going to go up with a friend of hers, another CFI. And so they did a little pre-briefing. And then once they were on their way, we went and toured her hangar. And she has a 1981 Piper Cherokee Warrior 2. It's sporting a Lycoming O360. It's got 180 horsepower STC power plant. And it's a certified IFR instrument cluster that includes a Garmin 650. The aircraft is meticulously maintained and hangar kept, and it's part of the Arrow Valley Flying Club, where Christy Wong is the president. So she's like, all right, help me get it out of the hangar and hop in, let's go. I got to tell you, Rob, it was since Tailwind was the last time I set foot in a GA airplane. Tailwind Flight Center.
That was 2007, 2006?
The end of 2006. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
How
was it?
Oh, you know what? It brought back this. I don't think I stopped smiling for a good 4 hours. She is just so professional. We got in there. She gave me a quick safety brief, and we were off. She's like, "You want to taxi it?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." So taxiing out. I'm like, "Oh, you want to pull up on the run up, right? We got to do a mag check." She's like, "Yeah, good. You remember? Yeah." So yeah. So we went up and we went into this little practice area. She gave me a tour of where she flies, and we had a wonderful conversation just about 2,500 feet over the Denton area. And thunderstorms were rolling in. We were actually afraid we weren't going to be able to fly. But the weather kind of really fizzled out.
Held off for you.
So a bunch of people, canceled their instruction. And so we had the whole freaking area to ourselves.
Sweet.
And she's got the TCAS and the tablet with the really cool ForeFlight
flight
program
aware something or whatever.
ForeFlight, yeah. It's kind of like the GA version of Jeppesen. So she'd look down and look at her tablet and be like, "Oh, there's somebody over here that's not doing altitude reporting. Let's stay away from them." And, "Oh, there's somebody over here and 2 miles ahead of us." Total TCAS live. It was with the weather overlay and everything. And I was like, damn, this is like more advanced than so the stuff I'm flying,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Did some impossible turns, came back and she had me do the first landing. She didn't demonstrate. I was like, okay, keep an eye on me though. Don't let me embarrass myself. And of course I flared too high. she had one finger on the control. She's like, nope, nose over. No, not yet. Not yet. I'm like, oh my God.
Wait for it.
Wait for it. And then just then it went, eek, I was like, holy crap, I feel like we're sitting on the ground.
Sitting on the runway.
And so she's like, okay, touch and go. Here we go. Let's go. Flaps up.
Man.
Full
That's,
prop.
When I was teaching at Tailwind, I had checked out 2 British Airways 747 pilots. And so I was checking them out in the 182 that they had. And when we were coming in for the first landing, he's like, oh, what speed should I maintain? I was like, between 80 and 85. That's a good approach speed with, flaps 10 or something like that. And
yeah.
And he's like, okay. And as we approached like 200 feet, he was saying, oh my gosh, I really, really want to flare right about now. And I'm like, no, we're still 200 feet in the air. And we haven't even got over the runway yet. He's like, I know, but in the 747, this is about the point where we're starting to slow and flare. And I'm like, really? He's like, no, yeah. And he's like, yeah, just watch me closely. And we got to about 100 feet and he starts pulling the power back to idle. And I'm like, no, keep it in. Keep the nose down. And it wasn't that exciting, but that was still still coaching him down. And then finally, we got into the landing flare and we floated a little long because, he didn't know when the flare. But we got it on the ground. I was like, all right, let's go do it again. And by the second, third time, he had it down packed. But
yeah,
man, that was fun.
Yeah, I actually remember you telling me that story, and I went in prepared. I was like, okay, well, the cool thing is, there was no one in the pattern. It's a towered airport. She knows everybody there. She knows the tower controllers.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what do you want to do? And so we did a couple pattern circuits, and then on the third landing, she demonstrated the second landing, and then on the third landing, I nailed it. She's like, oh my God, that was actually pretty good. I'm like, well, don't act so shocked, it's still an airplane, but so, I had oh my God, smiling from ear to ear, all right, let's flaps up, full, I want to say thrust lever, full throttle, and let's go up in the pattern, all right, there's, a VX, VY, let's climb out. There we go. And he's like, well, what do you want? I'll give you whatever you want. You want to do a circle we just landed on 3-6 right. And you want to circle to 1-8 right, and just kind of do power off
teardrops,
and she's like, yeah, let's do that. So she was like, let me do the first one. I'm like, okay. So at 500 feet, the throttle comes to idle. She does a 180 degree turn, and we try to make the runway without adding any power. Basically, engine failure on the impossible turn, as they call it.
On the upwind, yeah.
And she nails it. She's fantastic pilot. And she's like, okay, flaps up, it's your aircraft. Like, oh, okay. So, full throttle, and I come back up, and I do the same thing in the opposite direction. So we were basically doing this like figure eights over the runway, and the tower controller is like, yeah, you're cleared as requested. And we were kind of talking earlier about coyotes on the runway and things that you see on the runway. And sure enough, I come in, I made the runway. I'm right on the aiming point markers. I even was like, watch this, hold my beer, watch this. Aiming point markers. We touch down. And just as we're touching down, she's like, go around, coyote on the runway. I'm like, holy shit. I look up, 2 coyotes on the runway.
Oh,
and so full throttle, like get in ground effect, get off the ground, at least 4 feet off the ground, and then slowly start to pull up. And sure enough, right under us, 2 coyotes. And she reported it to the tower. And yeah. And I took video, and I was showing the family, like, look, check it out, so because she came back around, she's like, my aircraft, I'm going to come back around. Maybe we'll scare them, they'll run off, and the airport operations can get, So yeah, it was hilarious. So after a few landings, we ended up sitting in there for a debrief. I got to sit in on about a 45-minute debrief, CFI debrief. It was amazing. Wow. I want to say thank you to Kevin and to Christy for letting me do that with her student.
Cool.
I learned a little bit, and we got some audio I'm going to play right here from the meetup afterwards at the Outback Steakhouse. Here we are on a meetup with some wonderful people today at the Outback Steakhouse in Denton, Texas. I had the opportunity today to go flying in the Wong Warrior with Christy Wong. And I also had the opportunity to sit in on a CFI debriefing. And I got to tell you, it brought back a lot of memories, both flying and listening to some good old American flight instruction. So I just want to say thank you to both of you guys for allowing me that opportunity today to go flying with you and to sit in on your instruction.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming out. Your landings were not that bad for not having flown a G8 aircraft in how many years?
Yeah, did we figure that out? Like almost 14, 15 years?
Yeah, 15 years, I think you said.
Wow.
So not bad. We had a lot of fun.
Oh
We
my God, yeah.
saw some interesting things. We had great conversation.
And what did we see? Coyotes on the runway?
Coyotes on the runway. 2 of them, actually.
Here I was practicing I think we were doing power off 180s, which was, challenging. I was sweating like crazy, trying to both, impress and at the same time not do anything stupid. And here we were. It was going to be a really good touchdown. And Christy said, go around, coyotes on the runway.
Yeah, coyote on the runway, going around. That's exactly the way I said it to the tower, too.
Yeah.
So, and then tower grabbed the binoculars and confirmed there were, in fact, coyotes on the runway.
Yeah, I mean, talk about an experience. And the weather cooperated today. We're a little worried about that.
Yeah, we were. It worked out, though. It was beautiful. It was like the skies parted just so that we could fly. And what was great is that everybody else stayed grounded. So we literally had the airspace to ourselves almost.
Yeah, that was really cool. And we were kind of stalking a very special CFI. Tell me about what we did there.
So I had one of my silly students, Brian, go up with a friend of mine who's also a CFI to do a stage check for me because instrument check ride's coming up. And I am that helicopter, CFI, where I want to hear and see what my students are doing. So we kind of buzzed around the area and listened to them do the transmissions with air traffic control to make sure that they were okay and see how he was doing. I wanted to see how his performance was without me in the cockpit. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. And Kevin, how did your student do there?
Yeah, my student, some of you may have heard of him, Brian Turner from Just Plain Silly. He did great, actually. He was really...
He has an awesome instructor.
I have never flown in a Cirrus before, and he did a great job showing me, and he's not an instructor, showing me the ins and outs of it, and I actually felt, I was a little bit, not nervous, but I was excited in a way, but I wanted to learn about the airplane, and he really knew his stuff about the airplane, and it was really fun. We went in actual IMC conditions, did a bunch of approaches, and I really got to test him out and basically gave him a mock check ride. And then you guys got to sit in for the debriefing, which was pretty thorough, but I think we all had a great discussion. Everybody was jumping in and talking about their experiences to
highlight certain things.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what's great about those group debriefs too, is that they're not like you're talking to the student, it's a discussion. And that's the way I like it as well. I like the student giving input as well. And Brian definitely had input. So it wound up being just a really engaging event, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I had a blast. It was a good time.
Yep, and I got to tell you, it was one of the highlights of the year to be able to get together with you. I mean, last time we spoke was during the podcast where we recorded together, and that was an honor then, and this is an honor now. So I just want to say thank you to both of you for having me here today and giving me the opportunity to go flying.
Yeah, thanks. You are welcome anytime.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all right, thanks guys, and now back to you.
And back to me in the studio. Well, Rob, I can't say it enough. Thank you to Christy for, having me and going flying and taking me up. It was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, she's so nice. That was a crazy cool experience that she was able to afford you. And man, that sounds like one hell of a time. I wish I'd like to do that one time myself. So maybe, Christy, take me up. I want to go for a ride too.
I think she would. We would figure this out. We'll probably get you up there.
Cool.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll magically appear. Probably I'll be in the Aviator Sound Studios in Southern California. And Rob might.
And I might be in the Rob D Sound Studios in Flower Mound, Texas.
There you go. Well, part 1 of episode 81 has come to a conclusion. Stick around. We'll be right back. Joining me for the second half of Flight 81 of the Squawk Ident Podcast is an exceptional aviator and co-host. He's an award-winning trophy-hoisting tennis champion, a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, former freight dog, former airline pilot, a current King Air instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from the Gulf capital of the world, from his layover in Pinehurst, North Carolina, home of the Pinehurst No. 2 course. Pinehurst No. 2. They couldn't have come up with a better name. I don't know. A course that totes the most golf championships in America. From his mobile studios from the second floor of the Marriott Hotel in Pinehurst, please help me in welcoming our amazing co-host to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
Doing all right, Tony. How are you? I'm still kind of laughing at your, I guess my intro there. I'm sure you're going to edit part of that out, but it was like a 5-minute intro. I'm an award-winning championship. I'm an award-winning tennis player.
That's your same intro, man.
And then maybe I just haven't been paying attention before. And then we've got Pinehurst No. 2, which I'm guessing you have no idea what that is.
Well, it's a golf course, I guess. It's the golf championships around the... I don't know.
That's my case. The whole thing is just pretty funny.
Well, then school me, son.
Well, Pinehurst No. 2 is just it's a very famous course. It's held a number of U.S. Opens, both men's and women's. And I have discovered, I've never really thought about it. I discovered it costs like my yearly salary to play this course a couple times. But so I will not be joining the...
You won't be participating in the
no,
round?
Actually, that's what we are out here for, is that the passengers I flew out are apparently playing. It's there's I think 9 of them, I believe, all designed by the same guy back in the early 1900s. And there's number 1 to, through, I think it's 9. But number 2 is the most famous one of all of them.
And what's the reasoning behind it being the most famous? Is it just a better course, or?
That I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not a golf aficionado at all, actually. But just the design and, there's some very famous ones. You actually mentioned one before, Pebble Beach being one of them, out closer to where we are.
Yeah.
But just the layout, the scenery. I don't know. You'd need to talk to the golf guys in order to find out exactly what.
Well, as you're sitting here making fun of my lack of knowledge about golf, I took the liberty of taking a quick look. So the number 2 golf course, as you mentioned, they're the Pinehurst since 1895. They've numbered their courses. This is Donald Ross's masterpiece, according to their website.
We don't know what makes it a masterpiece. I'm not entirely. That I couldn't tell you.
From Pinehurst.com, the centerpiece of Pinehurst Resort, it has served as the site of more single golf championships than any other course in America, and hosted back-to-back U.S. Opens and U.S. Women's Open championships for the first time in 2014. As the first U.S. Open anchor site, the championship will return to Pinehurst in the years 2024, 2029, 2035, 2041, and 2047. So I guess like every, 6 years?
Apparently they scheduled those things pretty far out.
Yeah.
If we know that we're playing in 2047.
Yeah, it's a pretty good looking course. And I understand that these golf courses, millions go into keeping them, just
I'm sure.
meticulously maintained, and the design and the natural landscape is always a consideration when these architects of these golf courses get together. It's definitely a rich man's sport, and yeah, not something I've, other than hitting a bucket of balls, not something I've ever had the liberty to participate
We'll need
in.
to get you out sometime. We'll go play more of the $30 round of golf, though.
Only if I can dress up like, hey,
Ian Stewart.
No.
I tell you, I mean, there's wise guys. Well, I checked in a hotel. I asked the bellhop to handle my bag. He started to feel up my wife.
Yeah, only if I could dress up like Rodney Dangerfield will I go hit it around.
Ain't nothing stopping you.
Hey, I get no respect. Take my wife, please. Hey. Well, yeah, this course was, the design by Donald Ross, as mentioned, in 1907, redesigned and restored by R.T. Jones in 1974, and again in 2010 by Bill Core and Ben Crenshaw. Man, I'm learning something new every minute of the day. This is awesome.
Well, that's why we have our Squawk Ident podcast, is so that we can talk about aviation and so many other things like golf.
Yeah. Well, if you're ever going to be a true pilot and someday command a heavy aircraft across the Atlantic, you're going to have to know how to hit around the balls.
Moving on.
Well, I got to say, I'm a little tired. And we're going to talk about why. The first half of this show, I was very fortunate to be able to have an opportunity to record with Rob, and we talked about it a little bit at the onset of the show, is because I had a cancellation. I had an Austin turn that canceled, and as per our contract, if you have a sit for more than 5 hours due to a cancellation, wherever you are, in base at the airport or out and outstation, you are then offered what they call a day room, which is a hotel room that they'll book you a room so that you can go and put your feet up and relax a little bit. Because, as we've mentioned many, many times before here in the last couple of years of recording this podcast, the sit times between flights are one of the most fatiguing times, because you really don't have a place where you can get peace and quiet. Yeah, some bases have what they call ready rooms or sleep rooms or quiet rooms, but it's not the same. You don't get to take your uniform off and put your feet up and maybe even take a shower and get refreshed, take a nap, whatever. So they know this. So in an effort to keep you well rested, they'll give you a day room. And that's what happened to me. Well, that's where the adventure kind of really began. I was able to go to the Hyatt Place in DFW and get the first half of this recording done. And then, time was getting a little tight. So we decided to save the second half for the next day. Well, the adventure continued as I went back to the airport around 6 o'clock in the evening. We're getting ready to kick off and go to Austin for the layover. We were delayed due to maintenance. And there was weather around northern Texas, and that didn't help the situation with other flights being canceled and delayed as well. So we ended up leaving about 3 hours behind schedule. Well, I came up against what is called a flight time duty time, an FAR 117 regulation that states that all pilots are limited every single day, that from the beginning of their duty period to the end of their duty period, by two factors primarily. The first factor is flight time. Depending on what time you started, home base time, you might be limited to 8 hours or 9 hours of flight time or less. The second factor is flight time duty time. What that is, well, if you started at 6 in the morning, you can't go 24 hours without, getting your appropriate rest. So for me, it was a 14-hour limit. And what we do is we calculate backwards from your landing, when your calculated flight time was whenever you were going to land, work it backwards, and you can figure out the maximum off time, the MOT. And I was getting really close to the MOT with this new delay. So I, spoke with the captain and the crew, and I said, hey, guys, just so you know, I'm getting really close to going illegal. So, probably the faster we get out of here, the better, so that we don't have an issue. Now, you can extend And Roger, I know that every pilot has their opinion on flight time extensions. What you're extending is not your flight time, but you're extending your duty time. You're saying, well, I'm good to go for an additional up to 2 hours to bring my day from a 14-hour duty day to a 16-hour duty day in most cases. And I was falling under that category. Now, I have a rule. Usually I try not to extend because 9 out of 10, I'm not the only one that has to extend. We have a conversation with the crew and find out with the captain going, okay, are you willing to go? Are you okay to go? More willing to continue if the need be. Well, we got to the point where I was legal by 15 minutes, meaning we had to push off the gate, use up the allotted taxi time that the flight plan had, and we had to be in the air, wheels up in the air, or starting our takeoff rolls, I think the definition there. So in the air by a certain time, and I was within 15 minutes of that time. Well, of course, they overfueled the airplane because it was coming from the maintenance hangar from a previous flight, and it had 10,000 pounds of fuel too much. So they had to defuel the aircraft. That takes quite some time. Long story short, by the time we were all done, set, and ready to go, our new delayed departure time put me over my flight duty time by 1 minute. So as we were getting ready to go, I had talked to the captain. I said, listen, I'm going to go ahead and extend because we're boarded up. This is like the last flight. Everything else has been canceled. I feel good because I went to a hotel and rested. I had some time to record a podcast and everything. I mean, I feel great. So I'm willing to extend because, and I look back and see a full flight, completely booked, and everyone's ready to go. And they've been sitting around for 3 hours. So I was like, okay, I'm making the decision. I'll extend. So my phone rang, and we were literally a minute from closing the door and me turning off my phone. But I knew a call was going to come through, so I had left it on until we were absolutely certain we were leaving. And the crew schedulers are really nice when they ask you to extend. First Officer Charvella, we were wondering, we see you're over by your duty time by a minute. Are you willing to extend so we can get this flight out? Versus how they normally talk to you. And yeah, it was. I was like, well, yeah, we're shutting the door here in the next 5 minutes. I'm well rested. I'm willing to extend. That's fine. Well, how long are you willing to extend? And I was like, really? I thought you just extend me 2 hours. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to be in the air in like 15 minutes. I'll extend 1 hour. After that, if we're not in the air, then I'll call it. So I kind of like split the difference. And I'm like, okay. And sure enough, we pushed off the gate, got in the air, got into Austin. Well, of course, that made us illegal for our return flight. We only were going to get like 7 hours of rest, which is way below the minimum of 10 hours. So they adjusted our departure time. They delayed the flight in the morning by almost 3 hours so that we could be legal. The flight crew could be legal. And we were flying in and out with the same flight attendants. So it was easy. Well, when I woke up in the morning and I checked my phone, the app that we have for our schedules, that flight was canceled. And so we have you going on a flight at noon. You're going to fly to Dallas and then deadhead back to Ontario. And then that flight canceled. And so everything started canceling, and I'm thinking, oh boy. Well, long story short, I ended up deadheading out of Austin around 3 p.m. and landing in Los Angeles around the same time, a little after 3. And then I had to ground transportation to Ontario. And then there was a snafu with the ground transportation. So I waited on the curb for quite a long time. And really, there are no other options. It's not like you can go, well, I'm taking a cab. I mean, it's a 70-mile drive, just about, in rush hour traffic. So I had to juggle some things and make some phone calls, but finally got on the ride. I didn't get home in the front door until about 7 p.m. A very, very tiring and long day. But hey, that is part of the adventure of being an airline pilot, flying a schedule with what they call IROPs, or irregular operations, sometimes you get stuck. And I actually got lucky that I didn't get stuck in Texas into my day off, because this morning I was supposed to report for jury duty. And when I called late last evening to find out what time I needed to report, they had canceled my jury summons. So here we are, recording a couple days later on June 8th, 2021, joined by our very own in-house CFI, Captain Roger. Now, Roger, you haven't been on the show since episode 77 back in May 6th. You've had a very busy flight schedule and a lot going on. And I just want to say thank you for being here again today.
Absolutely.
What have you been up to, man?
Well, it's kind of been a combination of just the flying and the work schedule, plus some personal stuff with the end of the school year, both the kids and Tracy wrapping up school. So I've and having been gone a lot before that, I've been taking more time at home and being more cautious, spending time outside of spending time with them, I guess. And so that's taken some time and making sure everybody got school finished up, in addition to some flying, which has been a little lighter for me, admittedly, the last month, simply because of the amount that I was doing before. And then just this past Sunday, 3 days ago now, I'm pretty much not going to be home for the entire month of June. So I think that was recognized. And so I kind of got a little bit of the longer end of the stick for May, but I also chose to spend more time with my family during that time as well.
Good man. You're making us all look bad, man. Good man.
Well, I don't know about that. It's always a give and take. And then, like I say, I pretty much took off Sunday, and then they're going to be on their own this entire month now.
Yeah. You and I both have had some pretty crazy schedules. And I think it's very apparent for anyone that's been flying in the past few weeks that the airports are full. I mean, we've been saying this for a long time, but what's frustrating is, okay, so we're prepared. We're ready for full airports. It feels nice to be back to normal, to see this happening, and you're flying quite a bit, which is good. It means that, the business side of America is getting back to where they need to with meetings and whatever else these, corporate execs need to do. But the frustrating part is it's a 30 to 45 minute wait no matter what international airport you're at, because they can't find employees to do all the service jobs. They're offering, I heard this last couple days, they're offering $20 for an entry-level position at some of these places, $20 an hour, because they can't bring in people on a minimum wage scale. And I also heard through the grapevine that at Legacy Airlines, some of the employees that work in corporate structure, most of them are telecommuting. About 80% of what they do is from home, and then they come in, once or twice a week into the office. Well, they're telecommuting, and they've all been given notices that, hey, if you come help us out at the airport, we'll give you a little extra, bonus for helping us out, because we have a high demand for some of these entry-level positions that are not being fulfilled. They're hiring our corporate employees to come into the airport and push wheelchair passengers around, because we can't find any of the wheelchair passenger assistance.
It's pretty amazing the labor whiplash that this country has been through the past 18 months on how everything was humming along, and then the pandemic hit and it hit a brick wall, and people were losing jobs by the millions, specifically, like you're just saying, in the service industry. And now, I just drive around almost any town, because, obviously you and I, we see a fair amount of them. Pick a town. And if you're driving around, and you'll see signs in storefront windows, hiring, help wanted. I'm actually just right now, I'm in like this hotel circle, and there's 3 hotels, and there's a sign for all 3 hotels, help wanted, as you drive into the driveway for all 3 of these hotels. There's two Hiltons and 1 Marriott, and they're on the same sign, help wanted. And I So where are all these people that lost their jobs during the pandemic, and why are we not hiring these people back? What happened?
Well, if my unemployment check is higher than or relatively close or survivable, and I can survive on an unemployment check, and I don't have to pay my rent because I have a protection clause that I just pay partial whatever.
And they can't kick me out anyway.
And my kids are home. And to be fair, if my kids are home from school because they're doing online schooling or what have you, and now summer's starting, so now it's even harder because now it's like, well, the kids are home. I didn't want to take a vacation, all this kind of good stuff. I can't work because who's going to watch the kids? That costs money for daycare. And plus COVID and everything we're still not out of the woods. I mean, we're still not 100% open around the country, although some states like Florida and parts of Texas are absolutely open and no masks anywhere, and yet no outbreak. Wow, amazing. But that aside, why would I? Why would I go and have to get a job making what I was making before, struggling so much where life is good, right? The system needs to change, but we're not here to talk about that. It's frustrating. I did a few social media posts for the Squawk Ident Instagram page about coffee. I mean, most of us pilots drink coffee. Roger's not quite there yet.
Exception to the rule.
He's not quite there yet, but maybe in a couple of decades he'll change his mind. But as he gets older. But yeah, Texas, DFW, 8 concourse. Starbucks are closed, and they all have signs to say the next Starbucks. Usually, it's like further down in the concourse. So I passed 1, passed 2, passed 3. Like, geez, where's the next Starbucks? Oh, it's over at Seagates, Charlie, whatever. So I take the train, I go to Seagates, and then I get off there at the low Seagates, like Charlie 5, and I keep walking, and that one's closed, and that one's closed, and I go to the one that they said was open over at Charlie 25, and there's a sign. I said, sorry, this Starbucks location is closed. You need to go to Alpha 15. I'm like, wait a minute, that's where I started. They're closed too. So you sit there frustrated. So I ended up at 7-Eleven. Thank heaven for 7-Eleven.
So again, the Squawk Ident Podcast, where you can find all things aviation, golf, labor market related. Although I did just want to question you on one thing here. So on this Starbucks journey that you had, you went to, so you started out at what, A15 or something?
Yeah.
For your Starbucks, and then you went to where?
So I walked, it's like a horseshoe. Each concourse is like a horseshoe. So, I walked the half circle, and every time, usually every 5 to 6 gates, there is a Starbucks location, but they were all closed.
So then you ended up having to go to the C concourse?
Well, I ended up having to go there anyway because I came in at
So you were searching multiple concourses just for Starbucks?
Well, it was on the way to my gate, to be fair.
The A's and the C's were on their way to the gate.
Yeah, because I came in at A. I came in and parked at A5, I think, or something like that, and I was going out of Charlie 25. So either way, normally I'd hop on the train, go directly to Charlie 25, and there's a Starbucks right there. And so I'd get out, I grab a cup of coffee, I go onto the airplane, I do my pre-flight, I take a couple sips, and I get the juices going, and here we go. But instead of taking the train right away, I walked the length of the A concourse, thinking, I'll pick one up on the way. That way I get my drink halfway down. Plus, if you're drinking while you're walking, you don't have to wear your mask because you can't, right? So I'm just saying. So I'm searching. I'm disappointed, and I could have easily went to any of the other like little bagel place. There was a 20-minute line. Or I could have gone to Dunkin' Donuts, but there's 17 people in line and only one employee, so it wasn't moving. And so, so I kept walking, and I'm like, okay, that one's closed. Let me do a fine, because usually Starbucks is pretty quick. But
So this was your ringing endorsement for me to become a coffee drinker, is so that I can walk the length of entire multiple concourses in order to get my coffee fix?
My name is Tony, and I have a drug habit, caffeine.
So I got off the airplane, and then I went to A15, and then I went to A25, and then the next sign, it's like you're trying to get this point across about how there's not enough workers, and all I can hear is this guy has a problem. He's got a real problem. Well, I could have stopped by any of the donut or the other shops, but I really wanted my Starbucks, man.
Yeah, well, I posted this on one of the forums. I was just having fun, man. I had some time between my flights, and I posted this on one of these Facebook forums that I happen to be on for pilots that work for Legacy Airlines. And man, I was it didn't go viral, but man, I got many hits going, that Starbucks is always burnt. Don't go there. It's a piece of crap anyway. And they're against the cops. And I'm like, really? I didn't really? Okay. So I'm like, yeah, maybe I should just go to 7-Eleven and start drinking my coffee black and grow a mustache and the silver hair and go for the trifecta and wear the hat.
What is kind of funny. It's, I try not to talk about my coworkers because we all, there's only a few of us. But there is a guy that my boss kind of laughed at one time. Every time he's got a morning flight, because we all have a company card that goes to the same place, and our boss gets notified when the cards are used. Every single time there's a morning flight, guess where he goes? He goes to Starbucks, and it's the same amount every single time. And we're not really sure what he gets for the $14. I think he said that it was.
Wait, what? That's got to be well,
I'm sure that it's not just coffee. But
yeah, a Trenta caramel frappuccino in the couple breakfast sandwiches
and a croissant sandwich or what? Yeah, I mean,
some
I don't know
microwavable
what it is, but
Jimmy John's or Jimmy Bombs. Or
I do fly with him, and sure enough, if it's a morning flight, he'll hit up the Starbucks as well. Yeah. So it's not just an airline thing; it is most pilots.
Yeah, it really is kind of like a routine. It gives me an excuse to have something in my hand. I mean, I don't smoke, I really don't drink, and I have a cup of coffee in my hand, and it pisses off the family sometimes. Like, put that damn coffee cup down. I'm like, well, it helps me go to the bathroom. What can I tell you?
Blanket.
It pretty much
every time in the morning.
It's a social thing. Drink coffee, have breakfast, go and use the lav.
I know I put it down somewhere. I put it down. Where'd it go?
Well, so this past trip, this week has been a little crazy. And talk about a great way to bounce back right after recurrent training. Now, we mentioned we were going to talk about my recurrent training because this last week, I was in Dallas. We mentioned how I had the amazing opportunity to go flying with Christy in the Wong Warrior, and we even heard a little bit of audio from that. That marked the day before my training started. And then day one of recurrent training happened. And this is a new cycle for Legacy Airline pilots. We were going on what they call a 9-month cycle. And now they had changed over to what is now the R12 or 12-month recurrent training cycle. So this is my first experience. Now, we've talked about training many times. Overprepared and underwhelmed is the way to go. We've been hit over the head with, when to start studying and what should you study, and don't be nervous, go in, try to learn something, be well rested. All these tips and pointers, especially for the younger pilots that are maybe coming up to their first regional job or their first corporate job, and they want to study and they want to be prepared, and it feels overwhelming because that cliche of you're drinking from the fire hose, and you just have to be able to absorb the information and not pass out from all the information that's coming in. But as you get older and have more experience behind your belt, it seems to be that we study less and less. And I think that's because when you learn your first jet aircraft or high performance or turboprop or whatever it is, it's all new. So everything's like, wait, what? Oh, here's another fact. Wait, what? It's the same thing in the airplane. The first time you see something, your human factor, your body says, wait, what? And it takes a while. But once you've done power off 180s in the pattern 100 times, all of a sudden you lose an engine in the pattern. Guess what? You're going to be like, oh, okay, I've done this 100 times. Power off 180, I'll make the runway because I know I can because I've done it 100 times. So there's that level of confidence that helps really lower the stress and lower all of the human factors that work against you. This time in training, I dusted out my trusty composition book that I have for my training. And I always keep notes in this book. This is the same book I've had since day one of new hire class for Legacy Airlines. And every time I'm in ground school, I'll take notes. And then for the sim sessions, I'll take my notes and the debrief items. I always write them down so that I am not doomed to repeat my failures and the things I need to work on. But this time was a little different. And Roger and I talked about this a little bit off the air, how he asked me, how much did you study? And I went, to be honest with you, I dusted out my notebook. I read through the notes. I went through what is to be expected. But before showing up that first day, that's really the most that I did. And it goes against everything we've been preaching here, is to go prepared. But I'm not, this is not new to me. This is, how many years into this career, almost 20 years into this career. And you know what? It was an extremely positive experience because I think I got so streamlined in what to study so that the day before each event, I would study what I needed for that event, and everything went so well. Roger, what are your thoughts on my lack of freaking out over the preparation?
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, Tony. It's and like you kind of alluded to, there's a few different ways of thought about that. You have always, and I don't ever say anything about it because it's definitely not a bad thing, but I've always kind of laughed to myself when I've got my training event and, I started studying a week prior. I have never done that. I'm not going to lie. However, I also do not advocate doing it that way either. I think a lot of it just comes down to you want to be able to feel prepared, and each person individually. My recommendation would be for them to do whatever makes them comfortable so that they feel prepared going into an event. You've been on the same aircraft type at the same company now for 4 years. You had, your regional experience prior where you were there for, I don't even know how long, a decade, or a decade plus.
Yeah. 12 and a half years.
And
yeah.
At that point, that's what I thought. I thought it was about 12. And so it like you're going to learn something from it every time you go to training, but you're going to learn something from it whether you studied prior or not. The newer you are, the better off you are to kind of getting some stuff in beforehand. But then as you go on in your career, I think it kind of becomes redundant, and then you kind of you're more likely to become bitter about the training process. And that is also not something that I think is a good thing either. It's like, not necessarily something to look forward to, but also to be able to take things away from it. And if you're like, oh, I got to start studying a week prior, these things are not that hard. They are not built for you to fail. They're just to kind of expose some of the things that, especially in the airline world, that, hey, this is, as a company wide, these are the kinds of, or a fleet at least, these are the kinds of things that we've seen multiple times over the course of the year. And let's learn from other people's mistakes. So you can take something away from it. I think that that's a good thing, but that's not going to come from you starting your studying a week prior to showing up.
Yeah. You don't want to there's a balance, I think. You don't want to get burned out before you even show up on day one, where you've been hitting the books. The running joke is that all of us Sandpiper pilots that are now at Legacy Airlines through the flow through, we all are suffering from PTSD from Sandpiper, the training events. And I'm not going to lie, I was shocked the first time I saw a grown man crying in the hotel because they had a bad sim, thing where they had a sim session and they failed what they called a PC or a checkout or a stage check, and they felt like crap because they made you feel like that. They made you feel like you were worthless. They're like, you need to study, and you're not coming prepared, and you're not going to, and you're going to get fired. This counts for one strike, and you get 2 more strikes, and you're going to get fired, and then your entire career is going to be ruined because you were fired from an airline, and you're never going to get a job again.
That's a sad and unfortunate thing too, because
yeah, you just don't listen to that
What's
hype.
The point of that?
Right. Well, they're trying to scare you straight. Well, thankfully, I do not believe, and any of the listeners out there could maybe correct me if they know of this happening today, but I don't believe that that happens anymore. I think the AQP programs that the FAA set in place so that the advanced qualified program for flight training, where everyone has to answer the same questions, they have to come to the same standard, and they can only teach what's approved by the FAA for that training cycle for that 121 carrier. And that really has helped alleviate some of the pressures and some of the drama that was coming from the earlier training cycle events that were happening 15, 20 years ago. In the past, I think probably, I want to say last 10 years, maybe, with the advanced qualified program, I think that has been really suppressed, all that pressure, all that PTSD from flight training. And now it's a more kinder, gentler FAA as well. And I think that's where it stems from, because about, 2015, the FAA wanted to change their perception, and their whole culture became the kinder, gentler FAA. We're here to help, and not we're here to bust you. And so I think all of it is related. All of it can be, summed up to, we've changed this to, instead of beating you over the head and only the cream rises to the crop, to, hey, let's all get on the same page and help each other out, because we get more productivity and more compliance with being a kinder, gentler system.
And the cream rises to the crop.
Well, let's talk about what I went through, and then I'm kind of curious because you've got training coming up, and I know your training is much different in Part 91 world. But so I had it was a 4-day event for this R12, and day one was what they called RGS, or Recurrent Ground School, and actually that's my favorite part of training, because you're in a classroom environment, you get to hang out with your peers, you get to see some familiar faces, and you learn, as you mentioned, like some of the events that are happening, the trends that are happening in the industry, the trends that are happening at our very own airline. And that usually is, if you can stay awake, depending on the instructor, if you can stay awake and you're actually well rested and well prepared and not burnt out, and not that you were studying till midnight the night before because you crammed it all in, if you actually just...
So if you're one of those every 10 pilots.
Yeah.
What, like it's hard?
I loved it. I was awake. I was like, yeah, this is cool. And I, took notes. And so you do like an aircraft systems review. It's very, very, very minor. There's no test involved or anything. And then you talk about the emergency equipment, and it's a reminder on how to use the emergency equipment. Now, because of COVID and the restrictions we had and the face mask policy and not touching anything you don't need to touch, we didn't physically operate the fire extinguisher in the fire pit like we normally do. We didn't physically open and close the emergency doors. It was demonstrated to us. And then anybody that had a question that wanted to actually physically open and close the doors, we have these trainers in the basement there at the Death Star. And so normally we walk through in a group and go through all the emergency equipment and review how to open those cabin doors in the event of an emergency, and deploy slides in case they didn't get deployed. It's all part of the recurrent training process. And I loved all that. But the class that I really enjoyed the most was human factors. And it's only like an hour and 20 minutes long. We're all in this auditorium and we're watching these slides, and we see all the events that they have approved for this class that talk about controlled flight into terrain and how some pilots really try their best to do that, and what went wrong, and how many incidences happened like this. And it's always the same thing. You're cleared the visual, dive and drive, 3-degree down bubble, beep, beep, beep. Autopilot off, let's do this. And all of a sudden they hear terrain, pull up, and they're like, holy crap. So they pull up, and they adjust and
terrain ahead,
go back on the localizer and glide slope, and then they descend. And it's like, wait, how many times does this happen? So we talk about it. We talk about the contributing factors and how, especially at night, and you're going into a place with obstacles and terrain, you should, even though you're cleared the visual, it's a good idea to follow the guidance that you have from the charts. Do a GPS, an ILS. Don't go below glide path. Don't dive and drive. Get to the next fix that you can get to safely, and don't go below the published altitude. Even though you can see the runway, there might be a dark area under you or in front of you immediately that you don't realize is a mountain. So we talked about these things, and I really liked that class because in the end, you get to see the trends that your company's doing versus the industry, and when they're not so good and when they're really good. And I gotta admit, Legacy Airlines has done a fantastic job with curbing their unstabilized approaches, which is below 1,000 feet. You're, not in a position to land. You're descending more than 1,000 feet per minute, below 1,000 feet, not configured, overspeed, underspeed, whatever it is, unstabilized. It always warrants a go around. And sometimes people try to save it. They go, I got this. That's not the right answer. As a matter of fact, Legacy Airlines has the most go arounds due to unstabilized approaches in all of the U.S. Airlines that have contributed to the data. So good job for those pilots. They're not afraid to go around.
Or they have the most unstabilized approaches. We're not really sure which one.
Well, no, that data was there on the slide before. We have the least amount of unstabilized approaches. We're still not where we need to be.
So you guys have, Legacy Airlines has the least amount of unstabilized approaches and the most go-arounds as well?
Correct. So when they are unstabilized, 80% were a go-around because we have all the FOQA data. The flight.
Okay, so all that's a percentage.
Quality
basis.
assurance program. Yeah, so all the data, it's all real time. The airplane is constantly giving thousands of points of data every second through satellite connectivity to SOC, Systems Operation Control. When you overspeed an aircraft, before you land, they already know. I mean, the airplanes, they tell on you. So all this data that's collected for the thousands and thousands of flights every day operated over at Legacy, we have a FOQA department that collects it all, de-identifies the flight information, and puts it all into these wonderful spreadsheets. They have spreadsheets, really good spreadsheets. So that was day one. I really enjoyed it. Now you have Recurrent coming up. Do you already know do you have ground school associated with that? And how many days?
I'm actually doing an upgrade course. So I actually have a full type rating.
A full course.
It's kind of. It's a full type rating course, except it's also short because it's only an upgrade because I already fly the airplane, but I only have the SIC endorsement, even though I've received the training. And so it's a little longer than a Recurrent, but it's shorter than the full course.
And what kind of airplane is this?
That's for the Falcon 900.
The 900, okay.
Yeah. And so I don't know actually how it's laid out. I know that it's 8 days. I'm guessing that there's probably about three days of ground and probably 4 sims and then a check ride. That's what I'm guessing from previous experience, but I honestly don't know how it's going to get laid out. Unlike the airline world where you're just talking about the human factors, everything in the Part 91 world is just airplane related because we don't actually have any company data that we can draw from and make spreadsheets. So we just get systems for it's just airplane. And then because mine is, followed up by type ride, there are multiple tests that I'll need to do as well.
Yeah.
So I got that to look forward to.
Yeah. And how long is the course completely?
8 days.
So in 8 days, you'll get your PSE
I'll just get
upgrade type
I'll
rating.
just have, basically I'm just going to have the SIC portion on my certificate removed.
Gotcha.
With the full type.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. And you've studied a little bit, maybe?
I need to do a little bit of studying because the system stuff that I know is from a while ago. I know the practical stuff because I fly the airplane. So all the practical side of everything is not that like all the time, there's some things that happen in the sim or that the sim instructors want that we don't do in the real world. And so some of that stuff I need to kind of pay attention to, and, the limitations, the memory items and the stuff that kind of becomes a little hazy. I need to do as well. But like I say, from a practical standpoint, I already know.
Yeah.
Because it's stuff that I do.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid thing. I do need to do a little bit of studying on my own just to make sure that I have this kind of stuff, because it is a short time and I do need to do the full check ride. So,
And how many, which type, how many types do you have right now? And which one would this be?
well, I'm typed in the Embraer 145. And then I have the Falcon 50/900 type rating, a Falcon 2000 type rating, and the Falcon 7X type rating. And now what this one is a Falcon 900 Easy type rating. So I'm already typed in the Falcon 900, and I'm typed in the 7X, which is the Easy, and now I'm going to do a 900 Easy. Because it changed, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago or something. It used to be just if any easy type rating would actually counted for all the easies, but that doesn't. Now it's every single, and the easy is an avionics system. So even though I'm typed in the Falcon 2000 and I'm typed with the easy cockpit, I don't have a Falcon 2000 easy type.
I got you.
And so it's kind of a little redundant, but
yeah,
it is what it is. So
yeah, well, hey, it's a great experience, and so we had, this recurrent training is a little different because all you're doing is getting current on the data so that you can be a pilot that is prepared for those emergency situations that we don't do on the line, hopefully never in your career. Engine outs, engine fires, engine failures of V1, single engine approaches, single engine go-arounds, all the things that hopefully you'll never have to do out on the flight line. But you're expected, and it makes absolute sense, you're expected to be able to do it second nature. And that's what the simulator portion of these events are. Now, you're going to have how many sim events in your training?
I'm probably 4 plus.
4. So usually the
one
first couple are kind of like showing you the maneuvers you already know, but just to get you refreshed so that you can do them.
Usually it's like the first 1 or 2 will basically be what you're going to do on the check ride. You're going to go up, you're going to do the stalls, you're going to do your steep turns, you're going to do the precision approach, the non-precision approach. And then you've got a day that's all emergencies where everything breaks of all kinds of different varieties. And then usually there's a cold day, like snow and anti-ice operations, ground and flight.
Nice.
And a hot and high, like where they'll take you to Reno or something, where you're going to go through the high density altitude scenarios and off of a high density altitude airport and how the airplane's going to do that. And usually that, and then another check ride prep, if you will. Usually that's how it's going to be set up. So I guess there's going to be kind of the warm up, a hot, a high, and a check ride prep is probably what it'll amount to.
Nice.
If I had to guess.
Yeah. Oh, we do kind of for a recurrent, we do 3 simulator sessions now that we're on this R12. The first one, it's a lot of the same stuff. Day 1 of the sim, which is day 2 of training, it's called RTS, Recurrent Training Simulator. And it's not a Jeopardy event. It's just, you're going to go, you do like an hour, a 2-hour debrief or 2-hour brief before the sim event. And what we did was they snap you onto a gate in the simulator. And from there, they want to see you do a regular, like you just got into an airplane. And the graphics in there are amazing. I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar simulator. You get in there and you run it just like you normally would. And the sim instructor is there to just kind of facilitate everything. Like you say, okay, and you push the buttons for an ATIS and he'll hand you an ATIS, or it'll print through the printer on the flight deck, which is just like the real one. We did a low visibility takeoff. So we had to deal with, all right, you push off the gate, the visibility is low, you're going to start the engines. Now, maybe they gave you a runway change. What are you going to do? Well, if the visibility is low, maybe it's a good idea that you tell ATC, set the parking brake before any of the pilots now put their head into the flight management system so that you have two less eyes or 4 less eyes outside, right? You want to be able to make the good, safe call, which is stop the aircraft, load the FMGC or load the box, and then continue your taxi and brief. That way, you're not getting in the dirt or making a wrong turn or what have you. So we did that. The captain had to do a Cat 2, Category 2 auto land, which is when you're less than Category 1 minimums for an ILS, you're Cat 2 minimum. So we had to demonstrate that we knew how to do that, how to run the procedures. We have something called the blue pages in the back of our quick reference handbook, or the QRH, so that everything's labeled like, okay, what do you have to make sure you do to set up for a Cat 2 approach or Cat 3 approach? And so you have to go through there. You don't necessarily have to pull out the blue pages, but it's a good reference to make sure that you did it. It's not a checklist. It's just a reference to a go around. So, okay, hey, vehicle on the runway, go around. So, okay, do a go around. And then you come back around and do another one and do a landing. And I mean, I'm not going to go through the minutia of every single maneuver that we did, but we're doing takeoffs with gusts, and we did a VOR approach. How often do you do a VOR approach in an airliner? It's very rare. So we got that. We talked about a couple failures. We had a pneumatic failure of some kind, air conditioning pack that failed. So you have to have all the minutia of, okay, what are my limitations? What's my altitude? How do I do the procedure to descend? Those kind of things. Do a non-normal landing, because now you have a failure of a system. So it's not a normal landing, it's a non-normal landing. So do you go through, who do you notify? My captain that I was with actually had a really good little saying that he said, anytime you have a non-normal event, you're looking for 2, 2, and 2. So in the air, you want to notify 2 people, ATC and SOC. As soon as you've done that, you want to notify 2 more people. You've got the cabin, you want to notify them, and you want to make sure that the ground, wherever you're going, if you're diverting or if you're continuing, the ground operations knows. And then once you get on the ground, to our ATC, if you're going to, taxi off the gate, or what are you going to do? And then once you get to the gate maintenance, right, or whoever you need to talk to. So 2, 2, and 2, and I'm not exactly sure if those are exactly the people that he was talking about, but it was pretty good to know that, okay, have I talked to both in the air? Okay, have I talked to both on the ground? And then we also did just this minutia of stuff for 4 hours, including a takeoff with an engine failure in the second segment, a single engine Cat 1 ILS approach to a landing, and then a takeoff with a fire between V1 and V2, a single engine Cat 1 again to a landing, gusty winds takeoff with electrical non-normal procedures. We did gusty crosswind landings and localizer only approaches, which that was an interesting one. It was an I gotcha. So the localizer that they chose for us, if you loaded the ILS in the FMGC as like ILS, whatever it was, ILS 1-2, localizer only, it did not have a intermediary waypoint listed between the final approach fix and the missed approach point. If you loaded the localizer only approach in the FMGC, which is way down on the list for 1-2, then it had an intermediary waypoint displayed on the chart and on your ND, your navigation display. And when you look at the minimums, the charted minimums were much lower if you had the information for the intermediate waypoint there between the final approach fix and your MDA in that case. So that was an I gotcha, because if you loaded the first chart in the flight management computer, you didn't have it, and if you put the lower minimums in there, then technically you would bust the altitude for missed approach. So these little tiny things were really interesting, and this is what these simulator events are all about. The little tiny bits of information. We know that you can fly the airplane. We know you can do these approaches. You've done them how many years in a row throughout your career, but do you catch these little nuances that are going to make you or break you in an event like this? So that was day 1, and We ended up finishing the day with a PRM approach 10 right into Chicago, which was interesting. I've done them many times, being based there for many years with Sandpiper, but it was nice to kind of dust that off the shelf and take a look at that again. Day 2 was all about maneuvers observation. Like you said, you guys do steep turns and stalls and things like that. We did pretty much the same thing, but it all had to do with, we did a few stalls at altitude at 35,000 feet. It takes a long time to recover. You're going to lose a lot of altitude and a lot of airspeed very fast. You're on the, pretty much on the backside of the power curve, and they have to actually put the airplane out of normal law in order to induce a stall. So, you're not paying attention. Technically, in the Airbus, you can hold full aft side stick, and the airplane will not stall. It will nose over. In the alpha protection zone, it will nose over and will not let you stall. So you'll lose altitude before you stall. But when you pull the airplane out of that by failing a system that they do, then, you don't have that protection. And therefore, you stall. And then you get to see in the simulator world what it's really like. And man, it takes a long time. It's not like a Cessna where you just nose it over and add some power and, okay, recovered. Like within, a second or two. This took a good minute and a half to recover. So when you read these accident investigation reports with the airliners stalling over the ocean and they lose all this stuff, like, why didn't they just nose the nose over, Doesn't work that way.
Well, if you were to do a one-to-one comparison and stall an Airbus at 5,000 feet, you'd find that it recovered relatively quickly as well.
At 5,000 feet, yes.
A lot of that has to do with most of that has to do with the altitude difference.
Yeah, the altitude and the swept wing design and all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So that day 2 was fun. I had a good time. We learned a few things. And then day 3 was the interesting part. Day 3 in the simulator, or day 4 of ground school, we did our CQ line or LOE line observation evaluation, where they can't pause the sim. They're not allowed. This is an evaluation. So you are doing a flight, and we ended up doing a flight DCA to Boston. Well, they run you through, they make sure that you know how to load the single engine procedures at a DCA and the departure procedures, and you do the mandatory briefing and all the stuff that you're supposed to do. Well, halfway through the flight, they gave us an emergency situation where we had to run through our procedures, define, all right, my aircraft, your aircraft, is it an ECAM exception or a quick action item? No, it's not. Okay. So my aircraft, my radios, ECAM actions, and you read through the ECAM actions and you follow the procedure. And then once you've completed that, you go through the status pages. Once you go through that, then you do the follow-up items. And in the follow-up items, way down in the QRH, in the follow-up items, after you've been working this procedure, it says land as soon as possible. It doesn't say land as soon as possible on the ECAM. It doesn't say land as soon as possible anywhere else. But on the follow-up items, it says that. So that's the I gotcha there, is that if you're all nervous and you're like, oh, emergency procedure, even though you're in a simulator, you want to do well. And you're like, oh, well, let's just continue. Like, well, if you didn't do the follow-up items, you didn't see that. So we ended up diverting the JFK, and as soon as we landed, they said, good job. This portion of the simulator is over. Let's take a break. And we came back and we did our, what they call RAD. And RAD is the Recurrent Advanced Maneuvers. This is the controlled flight into terrain prevention, which they're we call them non-memory memory items, they're not memory items, but if you get pull up terrain, you can't go, well, what am I supposed to do? Let me look in the FOM or AOM to see what I'm supposed to do. You can't do that. You have to know. So we went through that, went through the TCAS stuff, went through wind shear. At the end of this 3 days of simulator, we were exhausted. we were tired from all these maneuvers back to back. It's crammed in there, and you think 4 hours in a sim, man, it goes by like a blink of an eye.
That definitely is one constant about simulator training, is that you go in there and before you go in, oh man, 4 hours, this is going to be a drag. And then you go in and it's about 20 minutes later, you're done. And it was 4 hours.
It was 4 hours. Yeah. Yeah. And we actually took, except for the last day where we got done pretty quick because we ended up diverting, so that trimmed a lot of time off of the first half of that. But yeah, we went the full 4 hours every day.
It's always, you always sit in the debrief room. At least it is for me. I mean, even having done this many times, you sit in the debrief room and, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And in the debrief room, you're sitting there and you're like sweating bullets, like, oh my goodness. And then you go in and all that stuff happens, but it is not as bad as you thought it was in the debrief, and it goes by in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, it really, really does. The funny thing is, after coming out of a simulator, it's very similar to being out on the flight line. You park the airplane for the night or whatever, and you go up to the curb at the airport, and the hotel van driver's there, and they go, "What flight were you on? Were you on 123?" And you're going, "Dude, I've rebooted my memory. I don't know what flight I just came in on. I had to RAM dump everything." Okay, sure. And then you got to look it up. I mean, you just flew for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, saying your flight number the whole time, but you've completely rebooted your mind because you've got to get all that stuff out of there, and you don't even know like where are we again? Well, when you come out of the simulator, it's 10 times worse. So you're in there in the debrief room going, and they know, they have glassy eyes, Pilots are like, I just need a beer and go to bed. So
there is definitely a lot of release from the stress of the simulator experience, no matter which sim you happen to be doing.
Yeah.
Because it's nonstop.
Yeah, it truly is. Well, I look forward to hearing about your simulator journey here coming up in the next few weeks. I'm really happy that we got to hear about what is really involved in a Part 91. It really sounds like it's the same as the airline environment. You just go in there and go through your maneuvers and your approaches and knock them out.
Yep. Which is kind of one of the, as a side note, one of my issues from an initial standpoint with that is, I mean, when you take off, how many times when you go into a simulator and you're doing all this stuff, this, single engine and this failure, how often do you actually ever go over 5,000 feet? How often do you, if you're in a simulator, the goal is to not go faster than 200 knots, because then you're just going too fast.
Yeah.
And you're just speeding everything up. And then yet you get out into the real world. It's like a lot of the practical stuff, like you've never done. Here, I give you a type rating in a whatever kind of airplane. You've never been over 10,000 feet in it. You've never flown it faster than 200 knots, but here you have a type rating.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that always kind of I get a kick out of, I guess.
Yeah.
About,
I think that's why
actually flown the plane like normal.
Yeah. I think that's why they do the line operation, or some people call it loft. We call it LOE, line operations evaluation. I think that's why. Is because let's see you do a flight from start to finish.
Fly it normal?
Yeah. And get an easy non-normal. The nice thing is, with all the revisions that we've had over the past few months, which has been very plentiful on the Airbus at Legacy, is we no longer have a memory item. No memory items on that aircraft.
Well, we wouldn't want you guys to work too hard.
I don't want to have to remember anything. Come on. I can look it up. Well, they got the one memory item was for a failure that in the history of Airbus has only happened one time. So they're like, yeah, this is no longer a thing. So
does that have to do with a display kind of failure?
No, it's the ADRS or AHARS, ADRs, the attitude heading reference system. If the airplane does an uncommanded pitch down, or if some of the protection from normal law disappears on your display, or the airplane, I don't even remember, has to have RAM dumped those memory items. But if there are 3 events that can happen that will put you into a place where the airplane will stall, basically the angle of attack indicators freeze and the airplane doesn't know what it's doing, and it's going to induce a stall protection maneuver with the autopilot on. And how do you correct for that? And basically what happened at Air France over the Atlantic when their AOA vanes froze, and something like
yeah,
that.
The pitot tubes froze.
Oh, so the pitot tubes, yeah.
And so their airspeed, they lost the airspeed indicator,
and they
showed 0.
Yeah, it has something to do with that. I don't know the exact reasoning behind it. All I know is that there was some procedures that I had to have memorized, and those are gone now. And they actually say in all the releases that procedure is no longer applicable. So, yeah, no need to memorize something like that. Well, as we wrap up today's episode, I again want to thank Roger and thank Rob for joining us under this circumstance of having a split show. It was actually not bad. It just took a little longer. I've been meaning to get this next episode recorded now for over a week. We've been struggling with our schedules and back and forth and cancellations and nightmare commutes and all this stuff. So no, I do appreciate both of you joining me. I also wanted to take a moment and thank one of our very faithful listeners who has reached out to me several times via our social media sites there on Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. Alex Schaefer wrote in via the Instagram messaging saying, "I hope all is well. I've really been enjoying your posts on Guess the Control Tower. It gets my brain juices flowing. I just finished up my CFII and will complete the cadet program training tomorrow." This was about a week ago. PPL through CFII. Not sure after that what my next step is. Hopefully, I'll score a CFI job somewhere soon. Ideally, I'll get a spot where I trained, but they are all dried up on AA cadets currently. Just wanted to give you an update. I'm still enjoying your podcast. Still? I hope so. And we'll soon catch up with the new releases. From Alec. I am so grateful to get feedback. It really does make a big difference with us here on the show. To know that what we're doing is actually being heard by more than family and friends.
And congratulations. I mean, he's finishing up his CFII, and I mean, getting close to getting paid to fly, and that's awesome. Congratulations, Alex.
Yes, really looking forward to hearing more about your journey. Keep those feedback messages coming. We absolutely love them. And again, congrats. That's amazing. And what a journey you have ahead of you. Really looking forward to hearing about it. Well, let's just wrap it up right here and say thank you for listening and sharing our podcast. We hope you are enjoying Squawk Ident. Please help us out by making sure to subscribe and follow the Squawk Ident Podcast. If you like what you hear, just spend a moment and write us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And please share the show with a friend as well. We appreciate your support and especially your feedback. You can send us audio feedback and comments via our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can also find audio archives from the show, photos from the flight line, our Squawk Ident pilot shop, the guest book photos tab. You can also contribute to the show financially. Yes, every penny does help.
Coffee.
And dang, I need more coffee. Now that, I can't find it regularly. Oh, I have a problem. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can find us under the Squawk Ident Podcast. And I just want to say one final thank you to Rob D and Captain Roger for joining me again today here on the Squawk Ident Podcast. And thank you to Christy Wong for allowing me the privilege of being in command of her airplane for a few hours. I've had the time of my life, and I think that the GA bug has been reignited. Also want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
Bye safe, everybody.
Brain. Pull up.
Like a mandatory? Is that like a mandatory to pull up?
Oh yeah, autopilot off, pull up. Non-memory messages. All right, hold on.
Bye.